Jace was fixing his old rover behind the scrap factory when he heard something strange in the night air. It was a thin sound, soft and shaking, like a cry that did not want to be heard but could not stay quiet. He lifted his head slowly, thinking. Maybe some animal was stuck in the metal piles. The wind was cold, and the smell of rust filled the whole place. But the sound came again, a tiny broken whimper that made his heart tighten. Jace stood up and took his flashlight, stepping over. Old metal panels and broken machines. The factory workers had already left hours ago, and the whole area was silent except for the buzzing neon light above the gate. He followed the sound carefully, looking left and right, because this planet was known for strange creatures that hid in the dark. But this cry felt different, softer, scared, almost like a child begging for help. When he turned behind the largest trash heap, he stopped breathing for a moment. There, between metal pipes and torn cloth, lay a small alien girl. Her silver skin glowed faintly, even in the dirty darkness. Her hair was thin and white like moonlight, and her eyes were half open, looking at nothing. She was trembling as if the cold was cutting through her bones. Jace dropped to one knee beside her. He tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat. He had seen alien creatures before, but never a child thrown away like this. He gently touched her shoulder, and she flinched weakly, as if even the smallest touch hurt her. He whispered, "Hey, it's okay, I'm not here to hurt you." But she did not answer. Her lips moved a little, trying to form words, but only a soft breath came out. He noticed her legs. They were twisted unnaturally, as if someone had broken them long ago and never cared to fix them. She could not move them at all. Her clothes were ripped and dirty, and she looked like she had been lying there for hours. Maybe longer. Jace felt anger rising inside him. Who would leave a child like this? Who would throw her away like garbage? He slowly slid his arms under her, trying to lift her gently. She gasped in pain. A tiny sharp sound that cut right through him. I'm sorry, he whispered again and again. He held her close, feeling how light she was. Too light for a child her age, like she had not eaten properly in days. When he stood up, something caught his eye. On the ground near where she had been lying was a small wooden tag. He bent slightly and picked it up. On the tag, someone had carved a single word in a rough alien language. He could understand enough of it to know what it meant. It said, "Cursed." Jace clenched his teeth. His anger grew stronger. Whoever left this child here believed she brought bad luck or danger, so they simply discarded her. It was cruel, heartless, unforgivable. He looked at the girl in his arms. Her eyes opened slightly now, and she looked at him for the first time. Those eyes were bright silver, filled with fear and confusion. "It's okay," he whispered. "I've got you now." As he carried her back toward his rover, the night suddenly shifted. A strange blue light flickered across the factory wall. Jace stopped and turned. His heart began to beat faster. High above the trash heaps, something moved, a shadow, large and slow, as if it were watching him. The air grew colder. The blue light danced again, this time closer. Jace held the girl tighter. He felt her tiny fingers clutch the front of his jacket, trembling harder than before. She knew something he did not, something dangerous. "Are they coming back for you?" Jace whispered, but she only shook her head weakly. Her breath was shaking, her body cold like ice. He hurried to the rover, trying to ignore the feeling that someone or something was following him from the shadows. As soon as he placed the girl inside, the blue light vanished. The night became silent again, but it was not a peaceful silence. It felt like a warning. Jace climbed into the rover, turned on the engine, and looked at the child in the passenger seat. "Don't worry," he said softly. "You're safe with me now." But deep inside, he knew the truth. He had no idea what kind of danger he had just picked up from the trash heap. He only knew one thing for certain. He was not going to leave her behind. Jace carried the alien girl inside his small home and laid her gently on the softest blanket She closed her eyes for a moment, breathing slowly like every breath was heavy work. The room was warm, lit by a dim yellow lamp that flickered softly. And for the first time that night, she looked a little safer. Jace knelt beside her. Unsure what to do next, he was a mechanic, not a doctor, but he could not leave her alone. The girl opened her eyes again, this time longer. She looked around Jace's tiny home with fear mixed with confusion. Her silver pupils moved slowly, like she was trying to understand where she was. Jace smiled at her, a small, gentle smile, hoping she would feel less scared. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Nobody is going to hurt you here." She blinked but did not speak. He noticed the glowing lines on her neck again. They pulsed softly like blue veins of light running under her skin. He had never seen something like that before. Every time she breathed in fear, the glowing lines brightened, as if responding to her emotions. Jace leaned closer, curious but careful. "Does it hurt?" he asked. The girl shook her head weakly, but her eyes told a different story. Jace brought warm water and a small cup of broth. He held the cup near her lips. "Can you drink?" he asked softly. She tried, but her hands trembled too much to hold anything. So Jace fed her small sips himself. She drank slowly, each sip giving her a little more strength. After a few moments, she whispered something, a single soft word. "Lyra," Jace frowned. "Lyra," he repeated. "Is that your name?" The girl nodded faintly. Her voice was soft, thin, almost fading, but it carried something beautiful. Jace felt warmth in his chest. At least now he knew her name. At least now she was not a nameless abandoned child. Suddenly, a scratching sound came from outside the front door. Jace froze, his heart beat faster. Lyra's glowing lines flashed bright blue, fear spreading through her tiny body. Jace stood up slowly, walked toward the door, and listened carefully. Scratch, scratch, someone or something was outside. Jace opened the door a little and saw nothing but darkness. The night air was cold, and the wind brushed against his face. He stepped out and looked at the wooden frame of his door. His breath caught in his throat. Someone had carved a message into it with something sharp. "Return the cursed child." Jace felt chills run down his spine. He looked around, but the street was empty. Silent, too quiet, like whoever had carved the message had vanished into the shadows. He went back inside quickly and locked the door. His hands were shaking. Lyra watched him with frightened silver eyes. Jace sat beside her again, trying to calm her. "It's okay," he said softly, but he knew it wasn't okay. Someone had followed them from the factory. Someone knew she was here. Someone wanted her back or dead. He checked her legs again. They were cold, stiff, and twisted. The bones felt wrong beneath his fingers, like they had been broken on purpose. Lyra flinched when he touched them. A tear rolled down the side of her face. "Did someone do this to you?" he whispered. She closed her eyes, tears shaking down her cheeks. She did not speak, but her silence spoke loud enough. Jace felt anger boiling inside him again. Who could hurt such a small, helpless child? He decided to examine her more carefully as he lifted part of her clothing. He saw faint scars all over her body, tiny, thin lines like scratches, burns, and bruises that never fully healed. She had suffered more than any child should ever suffer. He wanted to ask her what happened, but she looked so fragile that even speaking might break her. Instead, she reached out with one trembling hand and touched his wrist. Her fingers were cold but gentle. She tried to speak again, her lips shaking. "They will come," she whispered. "Who will come?" Jace asked quickly. But she closed her eyes again, exhausted. Her glowing lines dimmed, but not completely. They flickered like a warning signal. That moment, the lights in Jace's home suddenly turned off. The lamp went dark, the heater stopped, and the whole house became cold and silent. Jace stood up, grabbing his old wrench, the only weapon he had. His heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. Outside, the wind stopped, as if the entire world held its breath. Then a low humming sound filled the air. It was soft but deep, coming from somewhere above the house. A shadow passed over the window, blocking even the moonlight. Lyra's glowing lines turned bright blue again. She whispered one last word before the sound grew louder. "Hunters." Jace looked up at the window, breath tight, fear crawling across his skin. He understood now. Someone was coming for her, someone deadly, someone that had been waiting for the night to grow quiet enough to strike, and they had found her. The humming sound grew deeper as Jace stood frozen in the dark room. He held the wrench tightly, his knuckles turning white. Lyra lay on the blanket, shaking in fear, her glowing blue lines pulsing faster with every second. Jace moved toward the window slowly, trying not to make a sound. The shadow outside slid past again, larger this time, as if something was circling the house from above. He peeked through the small crack in the curtain. A giant shape moved across the sky. A dark metallic creature, or maybe a ship, its lights dim and red like watching eyes. The air around the house vibrated with each slow pass it made. Jace realized the hunters Lyra spoke about were not legends or ghost stories. They were real, and they were skilled at tracking their target in silence. He rushed away from the window and returned to Lyra's side. "We need to hide," he whispered quickly. Lyra opened her eyes halfway, struggling to stay awake. Her voice barely reached his ears when she said, "They can smell the glow." Jace felt a wave of fear crash through him. The glowing lines on her neck and arms continued to flicker like tiny blue lanterns. He gently placed his hand over one glowing patch, trying to cover it, but the light still leaked through his fingers. He thought fast. Grabbing an old thick jacket from the corner and wrapping Lyra in it carefully, it covered most of her body and dimmed the shine a little, but not enough. Outside, the humming stopped. Jace held his breath. Silence returned, but it was a heavy, dangerous silence, the kind that came right before something attacked. Then a loud thud hit the roof. Jace flinched. Lyra gasped with a sharp breath. The thud came again, slower this time, like footsteps. Something or someone was walking across the roof of the house. The wooden beams creaked under the weight. Dust fell from the ceiling. Lyra covered her ears with her small hands, trembling. Jace whispered, "Stay still," though he didn't know how she could move even if she wanted to. He grabbed a flashlight from the drawer, but he didn't switch it on. Light might give their exact position away. Instead, he used the dark to his advantage, walking as quietly as he could toward the trapdoor that led to his hidden cellar. He pressed a switch on the wall, and the trapdoor opened with a slow groan. He cursed under his breath at the noise. The footsteps on the roof stopped instantly. Jace froze mid-step. His breath was stuck in his throat. For one long moment, nothing moved, nothing breathed, nothing sounded. A silence sharp enough to cut through bone filled the entire house. Then the roof cracked. A claw-long sharp metal punched through the ceiling and dragged across the wood. Jace grabbed Lyra in one quick motion, lifting her in his arms despite her soft cry of pain. He rushed to the trapdoor. He climbed down the ladder with her pressed close to his chest. The trapdoor closed above them just as another claw tore through the ceiling. The cellar was cold and completely dark. Jace placed Lyra on a crate and crouched beside her. He listened carefully above them. The house groaned as the hunters walked across the roof, sniffing, searching. Their heavy steps made dust fall like rain. Lyra's glowing lines began to flicker brighter again. She squeezed her eyes shut, trying to stop the glow. Jace whispered, "Please, stay calm," but he knew she couldn't control it. He placed both hands around her neck and arms, covering the glow completely. His palms warmed the light, hiding it just a little more. His heart pounded so hard he wondered if the hunters above could hear it. The hunters moved to the front door. Heavy steps shook the floor. The wooden door burst open with one powerful smash. Splinters flew everywhere. Jace heard them hit the floor upstairs. He held Lyra even tighter. A low mechanical voice echoed through the house. "The target is near," it growled. Jace bit his lip to stop himself from gasping. Another voice answered, cold and sharp. "She cannot escape. She is broken." Lyra trembled at their words. Tears slid down her cheeks. Jace's anger flared again, stronger than his fear. No child deserved to be hunted like this. No innocent being should hear words like that said about them. The hunters searched every room. Their movements were slow but precise. They scanned every corner, breaking furniture and tearing through walls. The cellar door rattled once. Jace held his breath, praying, hoping, begging silently that it would not open. After a moment, the hunters moved away from the trap door. Their heavy footsteps grew quieter. Then the humming sound filled the air again. As they left the house, searching elsewhere. But Jace knew it wasn't over. They would come back. They always came back until they got what they wanted. Lyra finally opened her eyes again, whispering in a trembling voice, "They will not stop." Jace brushed a tear from her cheek and whispered back, "Then neither will I." Jace waited in the cellar until the humming sound faded completely. His muscles hurt from staying still for so long, and Lyra's breathing was soft but shaky in the darkness. When he finally felt sure the hunters had moved far enough away, he opened the cellar door slowly. The house above was a disaster. Furniture was smashed. Walls were cracked and dust floated heavily in the air. It looked like a storm had passed through the living room and left only broken pieces behind. He carried Lyra back upstairs, placing her gently on a blanket near the small heater. The power had returned on its own, probably after the hunter's interference stopped. The warm orange glow of the heater touched her face, giving her a little color again. Jace knelt in front of her and rested his hands on his knees. "Lyra," he asked quietly, "why are they after you?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes were distant, as if she was trapped in memories she wished she could forget. The glowing blue lines on her neck and arms dimmed slowly. They always flickered when she was afraid. And now they were weak, like fading stars. Jace waited patiently, knowing pushing her might hurt more. After a long pause, Lyra lifted her trembling hand and pointed to her legs. Jace leaned closer. Her voice was tiny, almost disappearing with every word. They broke me." Jace felt his breath catch in his chest. He swallowed hard. "Who?" he asked, but his voice came out rough. Lyra closed her eyes, a tear slipping down her cheek. "My people," she whispered. Jace's heart twisted at her words. He imagined the small girl in front of him being hurt, betrayed, abandoned by those who were supposed to protect her. It felt wrong, cruel, unforgivable. He gently touched her leg again, trying to understand the damage properly. The bones felt wrong, twisted deliberately, not by accident. Some fractures had healed the wrong way, others were never treated at all. He frowned. "Why would they do this to a child?" he asked softly. Lyra shook her head slowly. "I was born different," she whispered. "I can see things, hear things. No one else can." Her glowing lines pulsed weakly as she spoke, giving her the appearance of a small star trying not to burn out. Jace listened carefully, wanting to understand everything. She continued. "The elder said I was dangerous, that I would bring storms, bring enemies, bring death." Her breath trembled. "So they tried to stop me from running, from escaping." She swallowed hard, her voice cracking. "They broke my legs, so I could not leave." Jace felt a deep anger burning inside him again, stronger than anything he had felt before. How could anyone justify hurting a child because she was different, because she had a gift, because she scared them? He clenched his jaw and looked away for a moment, calming himself. When he looked back, he saw Lyra staring at him, her eyes full of fear. "Are you scared of me too?" she whispered. Jace shook his head immediately. "No," he said firmly. "I'm scared for you, not of you." Lyra blinked. Her eyes softened, and for the first time, a tiny bit of trust appeared in them. She lowered her head and whispered, "You picked me up when everyone else left me." Before Jace could answer, the heater flickered. The room dimmed slightly. A distant explosion echoed through the night outside. Jace stood up quickly and went to the window. He saw smoke rising from the far side of the settlement, bright lights flashing, and the sound of machinery roaring. "The hunters," he whispered. His heart tightened. They were not giving up. They were getting closer. Jace rushed to his workshop cabinet, pulling out tools and old equipment. He found a small medical box he rarely used and brought it to Lyra. He cleaned her wounds carefully, using warm water and soft cloth. Trying not to cause her pain, Lyra winced sometimes, but she did not cry. She'd had cried enough for many lifetimes when he finished. She whispered, "Why do you help me?" Jace paused. He sat beside her and answered softly, "Because you deserve someone to help you." Outside, another explosion shook the ground. The hunters were searching through houses now, breaking doors, tearing roofs, scanning for her energy glow. Jace knew they had little time left. Lyra's glowing lines suddenly brightened as another burst of energy shook the settlement. She clutched Jace's arm tightly. "They will find me," she said, voice trembling with certainty. Jace looked at her, determination in his eyes. "Then we won't be here when they do," he said. He packed a small bag with supplies and wrapped Lyra in a warm blanket, lifting her gently into his arms as he stepped outside into the cold night air. He looked toward the burning sky. The hunters' ships hovered in the distance, scanning every corner, searching relentlessly. But Jace had already chosen his path. He whispered to Lyra, "I won't let them take you." And with the moonlight shining on the road ahead, he began to run. Jace ran through the cold night carrying Lyra tightly against his chest. The wind cut across his face, and the sky above flashed with red lights from the hunters' ships. The settlement behind him echoed with distant explosions as the hunters tore through more houses, searching for the faintest trace of the glowing child they wanted so badly. Lyra hid her face in his jacket, trembling with every sound. The old tunnels were not far. Jace had used them years ago when the settlers first built the town. They were created as emergency escape routes, mostly forgotten now, but he remembered every turn, every broken lamp, every narrow passage. He reached the old entrance hidden behind a pile of metal scraps. He lowered Lyra gently and pushed the heavy grate open with all his strength. The tunnel air was cold and smelled like damp stone. The narrow corridor stretched deep underground, lit only by faint emergency lights that flickered weakly. Jace picked Lyra up again and stepped inside, closing the grate behind him. As soon as the metal clicked shut, the sound of a hunter ship roared above the surface, passing dangerously close. Lyra pressed her small hand against his chest, her voice shaking when she whispered, "They feel me." Even now, Jace shook his head firmly. "Not down here," he whispered. "The tunnels block signals. We're safe for now." But he knew the truth. Safety was temporary, fragile, easily broken. They walked deeper into the tunnel, Jace careful. With every step, the dim lights threw long shadows along the rocky walls. Lyra's glowing lines flickered occasionally, but she tried her hardest to keep them dim. Jace could tell. Every time they brightened, she lowered her head and inhaled in pain, as if she were fighting her own body. After a long stretch of darkness, they reached a small rest chamber built long ago for emergency workers. Jace set Lyra down on an old bench and checked his surroundings. The room had a table, broken tools, and a dusty lantern on the wall. He lit the lantern, filling the space with a soft, warm glow. Lyra watched him with tired eyes. Her breathing was uneven, like each breath hurt. Jace knelt in front of her again, brushing dust from her hair. "We'll rest here," he said gently. "You need your strength." "No," Lyra whispered, shaking her head weakly. "They're coming." "They don't stop," Jace sighed, sitting beside her. "I won't let them take you," he said again, his voice steady but heavy. Lyra looked up at him, her silver eyes full of something he had not seen in her before, trust mixed with fear. She hesitated before speaking. "I feel something," she whispered, "like footsteps far away, like a breath behind a wall, like metal crawling through the earth." Jace froze, his pulse quickened. "Can you sense them?" he asked quietly. Lyra nodded slowly. He leaned closer. "Then tell me where to go. Tell me how to avoid them." Lyra closed her eyes, her glowing lines brightening slightly as she focused. There are 3, maybe 4, moving above us, she whispered. They search in circles. They talk to each other with metal voices. They smell my glow. Jace clenched his jaw. If the hunters were directly above the tunnels, they were closer than he thought, too close. Suddenly, the ceiling dust fell. A light tremor shook the tunnel. Lyra gasped and grabbed Jace's sleeve. They found something, she whispered. Jace stood up quickly and picked her in his arms again. Then we move now, he said. They hurried through the next part of the tunnel, deeper than any hunter would expect a human to travel. The air grew colder, wetter, and the walls narrower. Jace's shoulders brushed the stone with every step, but he didn't stop. Lyra buried her face in his jacket to protect her from the cold air. After minutes that felt like hours, Lyra suddenly lifted her head. Stop, she whispered sharply. Jace froze instantly. What is it? He asked. Lyra pointed weakly toward a sharp turn in the tunnel. There. Danger, Jace crouched, lowering her to the ground gently. He crept forward and peeked around the corner. His heart dropped. A hunter drone hovered silently, scanning the tunnel with red beams of light. It had already found its way underground. He returned to Lyra quickly, whispering, We need another way. Lyra shook her head. There is a path. Behind the broken stones. To the left, she whispered. Jace trusted her without question. He pushed aside the rocks with all his strength, revealing a hidden gap. The opening was small, barely enough for him to squeeze through. He carried Lyra through the narrow space, scraping his arms and legs against the sharp stone. But he didn't slow down behind them. The drone's red light scanned the corridor again, searching, hunting, waiting. Once inside the hidden path, Lyra whispered weakly, You listen to me. You believe me. Why? Jace looked down at her, his eyes filled with determination. Because no one else ever believed you, he said softly. And because you're not alone anymore. Lyra stared at him with wide, shaking eyes. Then she rested her head against his shoulder, whispering so softly he almost didn't hear it. You're the only human who didn't throw me away. Jace kept moving through the narrow hidden path, his shoulders scraping against the stone walls. The air grew colder with every step, and drops of water fell from the ceiling, echoing softly in the darkness. Lyra stayed in his arms, her breathing shallow, her glowing lines dim but steady. She clung to his jacket, trusting him completely now. After several minutes, the path opened into a larger underground chamber. A tall communication tower, long abandoned, stood. In the center, half broken and covered in dust, old cables hung from the ceiling like vines, and a faint hum came from the tower's core. Jace stared at it with surprise. He had heard stories about this place, a forgotten relay tower used long ago during the colony wars. He placed Lyra gently on the ground and knelt beside her. We'll rest here for a moment, he whispered. She nodded weakly, but her eyes kept drifting to the tower. Her glowing blue lines pulsed brighter as she stared at it. Jace noticed and frowned. You know this place? He asked. Lyra swallowed hard. This is what they wanted me for, she whispered. Jace leaned closer, confused. What do you mean? Lyra lifted a trembling hand toward the tower. My mind can connect to machines, to energy, to stars, she whispered. The elders discovered it when I was small. She closed her eyes, her voice becoming softer. They wanted to use me as a power core, to control weapons, to start wars. Jace felt numb for a moment. The thought of someone using a child this fragile, broken girl, as a weapon made his blood boil. And when you refused, he said slowly, they broke. You, Lyra nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. They thought if I could not walk, I could not escape, she whispered. But I did. I crawled away. And they chased me since then. Before Jace could respond, a deep metallic roar vibrated through the chamber. Dust rained down from the ceiling. Lyra's body tensed, her glowing lines turning bright blue. Jace grabbed her quickly and stepped Behind a broken console, the roar grew louder, and then a hunter ship smashed through the upper tunnel. Forcing itself inside, red lights lit the chamber, scanning rapidly. 4 armored hunters jumped out, their metal feet shaking the ground. Their helmets glowed with patterns like crimson fire. They moved with perfect precision, spreading across the room. Their voices echoed coldly. Target detected. Lyra gasped and clutched Jace's sleeve. "They found me," she whispered. Jace looked around desperately. He had no weapon strong enough to fight armored hunters. He had no backup. No plan, no hope of winning a direct battle. But he had one thing they didn't. He had Lyra. He turned to her. "Can you use the tower?" He whispered urgently. Lyra's eyes widened. I don't know," she whispered. "I never used my power willingly. They forced me." "It hurts." Jace placed his hands on her shoulders. "Lyra," he said firmly, "if they take you, they'll hurt you again. They'll use you." His voice softened. "But if you try now, you can stop them. You can save us." Lyra closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks. Her body shook, but she nodded slowly. "I'll try," she whispered. Jace lifted her carefully and carried her toward the tower's core. The hunters noticed the movement instantly and charged forward. Blades extended from their arms, glowing red with energy. Jace ran as fast as he could, sliding behind the tower's broken shield plate. He positioned Lyra against the humming core. Her glowing lines flared, bright enough to light the room. A wave of blue energy spread from her fingertips as she placed her hands on the tower. Her breath hitched, her small body trembling from the effort. The hunters reached the tower and raised their blades, preparing to strike. Lyra screamed. The entire tower burst with blinding blue light. Energy shot across the chamber like lightning. The hunters froze mid-attack. Trapped in the electric storm, their limbs stiffened, their weapons deactivated. Their red visor lights flickered violently. Jace watched in awe, shielding his eyes from the intense glow. Lyra's voice echoed with pain and desperation, but she did not stop. The tower pulsed like a beating heart, powered entirely by her mind, her fear, her strength, her will. One by one, the hunters collapsed, their armor cracked, sparks flying from their circuits. They hit the ground with heavy thuds, their systems completely shut down. The blue light faded slowly. Lyra's body went limp. Jace rushed to her and caught her before she fell. Her glowing lines flickered weakly. Almost gone, she was pale, exhausted, barely able to breathe. He held her close, whispering, "Lyra, stay with me." She opened her eyes just a little, her voice a weak whisper. "I stopped them. Did I do good?" Jace pressed his forehead gently against hers. "You did more than good," he whispered. "You saved us." Lyra closed her eyes again, not unconscious, just tired, deeply tired. Her small hand rested weakly on his arm. Above them, the tower hummed softly, no longer a weapon. Now just a quiet witness to a child's unimaginable strength. Jace held Lyra close as the last sparks faded from the fallen hunters. The underground chamber was quiet now, almost too quiet. The humming tower behind them glowed faintly, pulsing like a calm heartbeat instead of a weapon. Lyra's breathing was soft and slow, and her tiny fingers still held weakly onto his sleeve. Jace brushed dust off her pale hair and whispered, "You're okay, you're safe." Lyra opened her eyes. A little, just enough to see him. Her silver pupils looked tired but peaceful. She whispered, "I didn't want to hurt anyone." Jace shook his head gently. "You didn't," he said. "You protected us. That's different." He carried her out of the chamber, stepping over broken wires and fallen hunters. The air felt lighter now, as if the underground tunnels were finally free of something heavy. As he walked, Lyra rested her head against his chest, her glowing lines now soft like fading moonlight. The hidden path stretched long behind them, but Jace didn't stop until they reached an opening that led up toward the surface. He climbed carefully with Lyra in one arm, pushing open an old hatch. With his shoulder, cold night air rushed in, fresh and clean compared to the dusty tunnels. He stepped outside, expecting silence, but what he saw made him freeze. Dozens of alien villagers stood across the hill, staring at him with wide, uncertain eyes. They were Lyra's people. Their skin shimmered with the same silver glow, and their clothes were torn from panic and fleeing. In the distance, smoke rose. From the settlement, proof that the hunters had attacked everywhere, not just his home. The villagers stared at Lyra, not with anger this time, but with shock and guilt. One elderly alien woman stepped forward slowly, her voice trembling. Is that the child we cast away?" she asked. Jay stepped back protectively, holding Lyra closer. His voice was sharp when he answered. "Her name is Lyra, and she is not cursed." The elderly woman lowered her head, tears filling her eyes. "We thought she would bring destruction," she whispered, "but she brought protection instead." Lyra opened her eyes again, looking at her people with sadness instead of hate. She whispered softly, "You were scared." The villagers looked at her with pain in their expressions. A young alien man stepped forward, his voice cracking. "We were wrong," he admitted. "We hurt you because we were afraid of what we did not understand." Jace felt Lyra's tiny hand squeeze his jacket gently. He looked down and saw her struggling to lift her head. He helped her sit upright a little. She spoke softly, her voice weak but steady. "I don't want revenge," she whispered. "I just wanted to be someone, not something." The villagers bowed their heads one by one until the entire group stood kneeling before her. Jace felt a lump in his throat. No child should have needed to earn respect like this. Then something unexpected happened. A soft glow spread from the ground beneath Lyra. The tower's energy had followed her out of the tunnels. The light wrapped around her legs, warm and golden, like gentle fireflies settling on her skin. Jace watched in awe as the glow moved into her twisted bones, reshaping them slowly, healing them as if time itself had reversed. Lyra gasped as warmth flowed through her legs. She clutched Jace's arm tightly, afraid at first. But then she looked down with wide, shining eyes. Her legs, once broken, twisted, destroyed, were straightening, cracking softly as the bones realigned. Her muscles tightened, strengthened, awakened. The villagers watched in absolute silence, not daring to breathe. Then, slowly, gently, Lyra moved her toes. Jace's heart nearly stopped. She moved them again. Stronger this time. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she whispered, "Jace, I can feel them." He knelt beside her, his voice shaking with emotion. "Try," he whispered. "I'm right here." Lyra placed her small hands on the ground and pushed herself upward. Her legs trembled, her body shook from weakness, but she kept trying. Jace held her gently, supporting her weight, step by step, inch by inch. And then Lyra stood, for the first time in her life. She stood on her own two legs. Her glowing lines shone brighter than ever. Not from fear, but from hope. The villagers gasped, some crying, some covering their mouths in disbelief. The elder whispered, "A miracle. No, not a miracle. A gift." Lyra turned to Jace with trembling joy. "You picked me up when they threw me away," she whispered. "And now I can stand. Because of you." Jace felt his chest tighten with emotion. He knelt and hugged her gently. "No," he whispered back. "You're standing because you're stronger than all of them." Lyra smiled, small, soft, beautiful. The night sky glowed above them, and for once, nothing chased her, nothing hunted her, nothing broke her. The hunters were defeated, her people had changed, and her legs were healed. And the little alien girl once thrown away like trash stood proudly beside the human who had carried her through the darkness. Her story no longer a curse, but a beginning.